welcome back to the Numina podcast, everybody. Heather and I are super excited this week to have on Dr. Brad Lichtenstein, who's been a mentor, a teacher, a friend to us both. Lovely human being. Dr. Brad is a naturopathic physician, formerly a professor at the med school of Bastyr, where Heather trained, and I'm sure we'll get into that a little bit. Brad has also done a lot of hospice work, which we might hear about today, or maybe we'll hear about that in a future episode. And certainly has spent a lot of time working with the breath in a number of different ways and with biofeedback, which we've already discussed a little bit on the show. So we're excited to talk about all these things and more. Brad, thank you so much for being here. We're so excited to see you, excited to chat.
Well, I'm excited to chat with both of you. Nice to see you. Thank you for having me.
Okay, well, the first thing I have to ask, I'm putting both of you on the spot a little bit. I just told you a second ago that I was going to do this, so let's see how quickly you came up with stories. I want to start, Heather, with you. What do you remember from Brad's classes in med school? Here we go.
Well, there were several classes, one of which was kind of like foundational philosophy of naturopathic medicine. And one of the things that I remembered was at the beginning of each class, we actually started with a meditation. And it was really beautiful. If you weren't there on time, you knew to wait at the door respectfully. And it was just, there was a stark difference in how people were showing up to that room after that. There was an intention, there was a coherence to it. So I certainly remember that piece as being like, wow, I really love the intentionality of this and the impact also. So I remember that. I also remember, Dr. Brad, you're just, you're so fun. You have a way of really engaging people and, like I want to watch you and see where you are and what you're doing. And, so that's certainly like your stage presence, I guess, as an orator, is something that I remember.
Your stage presence does stick out to me because sometimes when I reflect on how I present, how I do things, if I have to give a presentation or go up on stage or be in front of people, there's two people that I don't necessarily intentionally try to emulate. I just have realized in reflection, I'm really embodying two people. And one is my dad, who, is on stage a lot for different reasons.
GT. Shout out GT.
Shout out GT. And the other one is you. And I realized after a few years of watching you present in our work together, I just started doing the things you did because I loved them so much. It just came natural. I was like, that just works. So,
well, I maybe we have to have a conversation about what that is. I'd like to know because.
Well, maybe our viewers are seeing it. I need to put you on the hot seat now, Brad. What do you remember, if anything, about Heather amongst all of these different med school students?
I wish I remembered her on her pillow in the class. I don't recall that.
It's not a good look. I can see why.
No, it was protective. It was a protective mechanism.
No, but I really loved having a class where people could do that. So here's how I'm going to answer this question to give you a little backdrop. So for 20 years of my teaching career, I taught the philosophy of medicine. There was a time when I was gone, 2006 to 2007, so I didn't teach every cohort in the first year. So I always taught philosophy of medicine, the foundations of naturopathic medicine. And what I heard from this, and Heather, you can maybe tell me what your thoughts about those classes was that people would say, oh, wow, there's this spirit of naturopathic medicine. There's this vital, I'm not saying vitalism, but a vitality to the medicine. There's this whole philosophy. And then they would get into their second, third, and fourth, maybe fifth year. And they'll say, we don't have that same philosophy. It's become more focused on disease management. Maybe that's a reductionistic view. But the core classes seem to have lost some not with all professors and not all classes, but lost the vitality, that integration that naturopaths love to claim to hold. So I say that because I also supervise in the clinic. I supervise counseling classes, behavioral medicine, biofeedback shifts. But also being in the clinic, I could see the residents and I could see how they developed their own style, because what I thought was residency should be for a time people develop their own style, not repeated what their professors and supervisors did.
Yeah.
And what I was always struck with is how many residents, and if any of any of the former residents are listening to this, they might not like this, but many of them lost the spirit in that need to be a doctor and be on their own. They became more mechanistic and mechanical, and here's a treatment menu, and didn't look at the person. That's, I guess, the gist of it, not the person who has the disease. And here's how I can answer the question. What I was always touched with and what I was always impressed by is I saw you, Heather, hold that. That you could hold the whole person and talk about, and be able to talk about, this is a conventional approach, this is an herbal approach, this is what we would do here, and who is the person. So that, to me, is of the highest value.
Thank you.
You know, what I'm hearing you say is each person needs to develop their own subtle approach and perspective on whatever they're treating. And that's what you were seeing in Heather, is like she did that in a way that also was present with whoever she is, the person that she's treating.
I believe most of us do not know what we want in a practitioner. And I tell the story of when I was back in the late 80s, I was a professional dancer. I was a modern dancer, and
I would love to meet that Brad. I would have loved to meet that Brad.
Yeah. Going on. But I damaged the cartilage in my knee. And I've told this story many times, even to students, but my father in Pittsburgh got me into the top orthopedic surgeon. I shouldn't say that. And he came in, the guy had seen 90 patients in the morning already. He came into the room, he looked at me, I told him briefly what was going on. He said, you need an MRI. And he said, I'll get my secretary and he'll schedule it, and left. He didn't touch me. He didn't ask me anything about me. He just said, and then when I got the MRI, I came back and he said, well, see, you need surgery. I can fix, I can fix this. And he pointed to the MRI and said, I can't read an MRI. And you're going to touch my leg, can I again? And he was like, no, you just need surgery. It can be fixed. And I said, well, I want a second opinion. And he turned on his heels and left. And I got a second opinion. Needless to say, I saw another doctor who knew I was averse to surgery, so he did all these other things which damaged my cartilage more. And in the end, I had to have the cartilage completely taken out. And the moral of the story, going back to what you were saying, had I had the wherewithal, the understanding to know what I want in that moment as a technician, I want the best person to repair the cartilage. That's what I want. Do I want somebody who's going to say, how do you feel about that? Yes, I would love that. But in that moment, I would have my knee would have been best served by having the technician. And I think most of us think we know what we want from a provider, but don't really ask. Because if we do know that and the expectations we have, I think then we can regulate, I hate that word, but we can regulate and adjust our responses to the provider when they behave a certain way. But for me, and what I was trying to instill in students, and because of the work I do, I'm not treating conditions. I'm treating the person with the condition. And so to me, what I was teaching and what was of value, and hence what I admire in Heather, is like working with the person, understanding, okay, these are these things that are over here that are important, yet who's having this experience?
Yeah. Well, so much of the medical experience is emotional, right? You weren't just your knee. That's why you couldn't just look for a technician,
Yeah.
right? It's so much bigger than that.
I will just say I really resonate with this. As you know, as a person living with a chronic condition, and specifically in type 1 diabetes, this is really, really common in the diabetes online community, where people will talk about really, really rough experiences with endocrinologists.
Mm.
And, you know, we don't think of type 1 diabetes as a behavioral condition. And yet we're making hundreds of decisions a day. And the idea, at least, and there's more to it than this, but the idea, at least in the care, is that the results, the outcomes that you get are directly related to the decisions that you make. Now, there's a lot to unpack there.
Yeah.
Like, I don't even want to open that can of worms with Rad,
Yeah.
because I know you've got a lot to say about that one. But
I mean,
but what I just
yes.
okay, let's get into it. But first, let me just wrap this up by saying, people end up going into the doctor sometimes. So let's say in this diabetes example, and they walk out feeling so downtrodden or ashamed or like they've failed in some way. And the result is that their care and whatever outcomes they get, their health ends up being worse as a result of going to that appointment in the first place. But they have no choice. They have to go in order to get their prescriptions renewed, and et cetera.
That's especially true when you're talking about behavior as well,
Yeah.
right? Like the decisions that you make, the food that you're eating.
Right.
Mm-hmm.
And this opens up just this can of worms. And Brad, I'm curious what you want to respond to about this. But what's coming up for me hearing this is like, yeah, it's especially hard around behavior because we ascribe behavior to something that we're causing and ultimately in control of. And I think that behavior is much more complex than that. Behavior is the result of our past conditioning. In Buddhist traditions, we'd call this our karma, but we also just say conditioning in Western traditions. And, you know, the result is that we act out in ways that are sometimes not ultimately helpful to ourselves or other people. And then we blame ourselves, which is ultimately often even less helpful to ourselves and other people, and continues this cycle of internal violence.
Mm-hmm. Well, I think I shared with you, I recently spoke at a biofeedback conference, and I stood up and said, I think, I'm interested in Heather hearing this, I said, I think that naturopaths, functional medicine doctors, biohackers, social media, and all of this, going directly to what you said, Sam, we cause more harm than good because people believe if I do these things, everything's going to get better.
Yeah, I think that that's kind of part of our objective here is like to humanize some science in a way, right? That there's, you know, we get this sense that there's a right way to do something, or, you know, that this is the way, and to really like break down the understanding of what the recommendations are, how to personalize those recommendations, you know, get real life examples of people peopling, and you know, instead of hey here's how to be perfect, and you know, good luck at that.
Here's the exact way that this protocol was done in this paper, or here's the exact clinical recommendations. You meet it or you don't, and if you don't, you suck, basically.
Yeah.
And if you don't, you know, there's no reason to even try to support yourself in this way anyways, because you're not doing it right.
Exactly. And how many people feel worse? So what is the goal? What is the intent here? But that gets into a larger conversation of like, what is our goal? And the delusion we're all living under that in this world, the way the world is, I'm talking about politically, economically, environmentally, we're going to ward off all these diseases.
Right.
Yeah. I mean,
right.
When I was a child, my father smoked. He was an attorney, and he would smoke, I don't know, 2 or 3 packs a day. And as a kid, I was so terrified of lung cancer. End of story. He died of lung cancer. But I would take his cigarettes and I would take them out of the pack and I'd write, "You're killing yourself" on them. in ink, which
Wow.
probably killed, right? That was the problem right there. But, and then I would put them back in the pack, or I would cut them in half.
That's
You know,
diabolical, Brad.
So
That
funny.
is diabolical.
my father was a saint because he never yelled at me about this.
That's so sweet.
Yeah.
Partially because I think he understands. I mean, I don't know. I never really asked him about this,
Mm.
but partially because like, yeah, this isn't good. But he smoked until he actually had intense macular degeneration and like a retina problem, and the doctor said, "Hey, you can keep smoking, or you can and lose your sight, or you could quit smoking and hopefully not lose your sight." And then, of course, he quit smoking.
Mm. Yeah.
And the doctor said it in a very gentle way, just like that. Here's the thing. But, the point I was going to make is I didn't smoke. Now, I burned a lot of incense, which I've also come to learn has, in several studies, massive studies, have shown increased lung cancer. Yeah. Okay, so I could have done that. But I'm at huge risk of developing lung cancer because I was exposed to that before the age of 12 with my father. It wasn't my choice.
Yeah.
Maybe, Sam, you could say it was my choice to incarnate in this body with my dad. But
I wouldn't.
You wanted to.
I wouldn't either.
I didn't. I didn't.
But right now, because, I do a lot of breath work and I'm concerned about the environment, the risk, if you live 3/4 of a mile from a freeway, you have such a high risk of asthma, COPD, and all these other respiratory issues. And I've said this story a few times, I think, when people ask me about this. It's like, I used to have a house here in a townhouse in Seattle, in Green Lake. It was half a mile or 1/4 of a mile from Aurora Avenue and 3/4 of a mile from I-5. And every morning I'd go up on my deck and do my breath work. Well, if you understand environment, we can get into all of that. Pollution goes down the hill and it settles lower in the cooler morning, and then it goes. And so I thought I was doing a great job of breathing fresh air. I wasn't. But can I blame myself? I didn't know that either. What I'm saying is, even if I have the most pristine diet, I don't know where that is. Even if I drink all the most unadulterated water, and where am I? I'm exposed to all of these things in the world, in nature.
Yeah.
And we don't even have to get into microplastics. So
Yeah.
I say that as a larger container, we don't have to go that large. But we think we're doing these best things, and we are so attached to it, which creates our suffering, and then we judge ourselves. How is that helping us?
By the way, Heather loves microplastics. I just wanted to say, so there's no issue
Definitely.
there. There's a
Big,
spatula.
Huge fan.
There's a spatula at home that we use that's just slowly got the edge falling off, but the grip is so good though, and we don't want to lose it.
Somebody needs to take responsibility. I don't know who it is.
And so
Well, I know where
every
you
morning
live,
we have.
so I guess
Come on
I'm
over.
coming over and replacing your spatula. But
Yeah.
All right.
Dr. Brad, what comes up for me hearing that is, there are patients that think about all of those things and are just, it's so overwhelming. Like, how do you move through the world if everything is scary? And, I can't live here. And if I drink water here and, so it's like, I'm not eating the right thing. What's the right thing? I don't know where to, right? Like, so what do we say to those people out there that really truly feel those things and are overwhelmed?
Thank you for saying that, because to me, my intention is that's the crux of my work. It's living. Sam may know this. My singular question to people is, how do you want to live in this moment? But then I put the tag, no matter what. Because most people, when I ask this question, I think I said this exactly to you, Sam, the other day, but most people, when I ask that question, they'll say, well, I want to be calm when my partner yells at me, or I want to be okay when. But what they really start talking about is that my partner changes, or that the air quality is better, or that this injustice isn't happening. And I'm saying, no. I'm asking, when your partner acts up and yells at you, when there's fires in Seattle and the air quality is at 100?
Yeah.
How do you want to be? My argument, my concern about social media and these platforms is they continue to bash us in the head with these are the right things to do, which then gets stuck in your psyche. Then they go see doctors. And even if the doctor is the gentlest person, they often leave with that narrative of they're telling me I have to do this. So I want to be kind to the doctors too. And I think the work is about learning how to be sitting with discomfort.
Yeah.
You know, as Heather, you may remember, and I talk about this every time I'm talking to people because I think it's important because it informs how I view the world. I began my career doing HIV care at a time the medications did not change the course of the disease. So I'm working with people, and it was not like cancer. I haven't said this as strongly to people. It was not like cancer because people didn't want to touch the person with HIV.
Right.
People were isolated, judged, even by other people if they were gay or if they were hemophiliac. They didn't want to be touched. And you know, if you had a common cold, you could actually harm the person who was ill. So it was a different mindset. But I was working with people, and so the first half of the visit, the first 10 minutes of the visit, we would talk the biochemical stuff. Okay, you're on this thing, maybe this will help with your gut and that. And we did a lot to mitigate side effects. I say that all the time. I stand by that. We didn't make people live longer. We didn't cure the disease. So the rest of the sessions were always, how are you living with this? And so I cut my teeth as a naturopath on saying, okay, it might not fix it, but how are you living?
Yeah.
I just heard an author of a book, R.F. Kang, who wrote Catabiasis and Babel, if anybody wants a really good book recommendation.
Not to be confused with RFK.
No. This is a good book. This is a work of fiction, though. Well, RFK's might be too.
Yeah, I was going to say that fits.
RFK, I believe, because that could get me into the HIV talk, but we won't go there right now. But she was asked, she's not on social media, but she was asked about like this question you're saying, Heather, but more globally about people, like all these things around us are frightening and we don't feel safe. And she said, and she said, what do you do? And she's like, we don't turn away from it. What makes you think that you turn away from it? Why do we, as Francis Weller, I keep quoting him lately, who wrote a book on grief, says that the biggest crimes in Western civilization is amnesia and anesthesia. We forget and we anesthetize. And I do that too. But what she was talking about was, no, you feel the discomfort and then you could take mindful action. She didn't say mindful action, but you feel the discomfort. And she said that can motivate you to donate money, to speak to other people about things. It doesn't mean it's going to change it. See, it's not the attachment to the outcome. It's living a life that resonates with your values. And a third of the patients I still work with, it's a third, it was half, but now it's about a third of the patients I work with have life-threatening, if not terminal illnesses. And so they have found me because we're just talking about how do I live with this? You know, and so we don't have if you want to say a catechism, we don't have, Buddhism does, other spiritual traditions, but culturally we don't have a practice of saying, I'm sitting in this discomfort, I'm allowing my heart to crack open, and from that I feel joy. we are living in a
Mm.
polycrisis. It's a meta-crisis,
Mm-hmm.
polycrisis. When I was a kid, I was just worried about Russia bombing us and a nuclear war.
Yeah.
And then when I was a teenager in my 20s, I was worried about HIV. But now I'm worried about the planet, and there's
Mm-hmm.
good reasons for that.
Yeah.
Yeah.
You know,
Yeah.
don't have to go into all of those things. So it's like it. So to me, and I feel sorry for my husband at times, not really, but because I read every day climate issues. Um,
Mm.
I did a certificate in eco psychology, and so I'm like on all these things,
Cool.
and I read about all the things that happen. And then I go, "Hey, this is what happened today. Oh, and by the way, this is what AI is doing, and these are the studies of it.
Mm.
This is the other thing." And then here's
And Richard
politics that's
works in
happening.
AI. And Richard
Yes,
has yes, yes.
Yeah.
That's why
yeah.
you feel bad for him.
Well, because he hears about this, and
Mm-hmm.
because when my friends hear about it, it's like, "Oh God, how can you be so depressing?" I said, "I'm not depressed.
Mm.
I'm heartbroken. I'm heartbroken, but and I don't believe the outcome for the human population looks a certain way." Do you see how I'm hedging what I say
Yeah,
there? But um,
yeah.
and yet I'm talking to Heather and Sam right now, and this is not like something I'm putting on. I'm serious. Like right now, I get to talk to you about these things.
Yeah, this is
Isn't that
delightful.
amazing?
It is.
Yeah.
It is. So I want to also like we've been talking a lot about chronic and terminal illness, and these conversations make a lot of sense in chronic and terminal illness, right? Like somebody has this very pressing issue that's right in front of their face that's very difficult to ignore. That is, they're not going to fundamentally change the outcome or the course of, and so it becomes about how do you want to live with this. People don't often think about how we all have a certain terminal illness,
It's called
and
life.
that term it's called life,
Yeah.
It's
right?
a sexually
Uh,
transmitted terminal disease.
uh,
Yeah.
never thought about it as sexually transmitted. You might have to
Unless
try
your
I
to
was
test
treat.
tube
just
Have you
gonna
baby.
tried to
say,
treat me for that
come
one,
to the
Heather?
office.
Unless
We've
you're a
tried to
test tube
treat me
baby.
for the other ones.
Yeah.
Say it again,
Well,
Brad.
Unless you're a test
funny you
tube
should
baby.
mention that.
But
Oh well, yeah. Funny you mention it. Actually, mine was not sexually transmitted.
Yeah.
Um, so sometimes this is, I think, it's in a way easier for people to see this
ah,
when it's kind of hits them in the face with a difficult diagnosis or difficult life circumstances, which make it
Mm-hmm.
impossible to ignore the realities of sickness, old age, and death. Um, but yeah, how do you see this showing up in everyday people's lives that don't think that they're concerned about these things, that don't think that it's, you know, they don't need to be concerned about how they want to live with this precious time. That's not their orientation. Maybe if you said it to them, they would say, "Yeah, I want to live well," but their orientation is not this that we're talking about right now.
I think most, nah, I don't like those qualifying words. Many people don't. So, first of all, we have to recognize that I am biased because I have a select population. I've had a few of my colleagues point out to me, it's like, you work with this group, you have a select population, like you said. And so, um, I mean, I worked with a woman once who had chronic severe pain, and I started asking her these questions, and she got so angry with me. She's like, "You're planting the
Mm.
seed that I'm not going to get better." And I said, "No, I'm not saying that at all." I said, "No one knows, and how would you want to be?" Um,
Mm.
so to your point though of it's easier when you're confronted with something. Isn't that the story all the time? It's not until we have a
Of
heart
course.
attack that something
Yeah.
happens.
Yeah.
Um, my in my work or when I'm talking to people, I strive to help make it real. I mean, we have all these theoretical, heady conversations about them, but I try to put it into a tangible, somatic, visceral experience. Um, and I think people can relate to that. I think almost everybody
Mm-hmm.
can. Do they want to? And when I say want to, I'm
Yeah.
cautious because I don't mean to say it and imply oh, it's a choice, or
Fault, blame,
Mm-hmm.
choice.
yeah, it's not a
Yeah.
blame. It's why would you want to look at this?
Are
You
you
know?
ready? Is your conditioning such that this is something that you can see right now?
Yeah.
Is this where life has led you to be able to see this?
Yes.
We're
And
all prepared to see something different in our lives.
exactly. But I mean, I practice this even with my spouse. It's like, how do I want to react to this? It's like, do I want to be angry because the person didn't fulfill my expectations at the moment? Yes, I
Mm.
do. Um,
And how does that work?
yeah, well, I often go, yes, I do. And then I go, no, I don't. But then going to
Uh,
your point of conditioning, but do I have the
right.
tools? I have to
Yeah.
practice it. It's not enough just to wish things. Oh, I
Mm-hmm.
so much have an issue with manifestation meditations out there, and the physicians who do that. Um, because when I was working at the oncology center, I would ask patients like, "Well, how do you want to be if the cancer comes back? How do you want to be if it doesn't come back?" I start talking about both of them because I've seen all of it, right? Um, but it's about how to be as mindful and present as possible. And if somebody says I don't want to, I say, "Oh, great. Who can help you then? Let's talk about that. I'm not going to judge that. How can I possibly judge that? Because there's probably 10 or 20 areas in my life I don't want to look at it, and I don't even know I'm not looking at it."
Yeah.
Sure. Sure.
Um, so, again, to your question, going back to that, of like, I think we can help people make that connection. And it's important to listen to that
Mm.
because it's as simple as saying something, eating something, like, what's your choice mean? You know, if I may say, bring this up, Sam, you and I were talking the other day, and you said something, and we both said something about safety,
Mm.
about am I
Mm-hmm.
safe? And, as I was originally trained in cognitive behavioral therapy, so if we talk about that, like in cognitive behavioral therapy, if there's a problem to solve the problem. Reframing comes later. You change that, but it's like if we had a patient come into the clinic once, and she came in. We'd been doing counseling with her for weeks, and she came in and said, "My husband's being released from prison today. He was," without divulging her information, but he was violent and was
Mm.
caught in the act
Mm-hmm.
of being violent, and that's why he went to jail. And she said, "He's being released today, and I'm
Mm-hmm.
anxious." And everyone's like, "Oh, we got to help her not be anxious." Like, hell no.
Yeah.
And I said,
Right.
Right.
where are you going after this? Who are you staying with?" And she said, "I
Mm-hmm.
can't stay with my sister because my sister, he knows where my sister's." And it's like, we spent 3 hours. I pulled the clinicians, the students. We went into another room and we said, "Okay, we're solving this issue right now because safety is an issue."
Right.
So when we do these meditations on safety, we have to ask, okay, right now, am I safe? Right now, am I safe? Right now, am I safe? And
Mm.
I think you and I were talking about, like, well, right now I'm safe. But I don't know if that's true. Right now, I'm not at risk unless there's an earthquake or the house falls down or one of Elon's satellites fall on my head, which is a risk. Um, but right now, I can say, okay, I'm not safe. I'm not having any physical health stuff. But this goes back to what you're talking about, the long view. People are enacting laws that are actually going to impact my safety. Right now,
Mm.
people are not being safe. And if I think, oh, well, those people who are being arrested or just blindly taken away, or, oh, the 2,000 people that died last week in either earthquake or in, flooding, that can't happen here. What are we doing that's leading to that? So, you were saying, like, we can't see that our behaviors are impacting our health. We can start to expand this issue of safety.
Yes. So we've got a few more minutes in the podcast, and I want to round it out by speaking a little bit to one of the ways that you lean into supporting people in being with things as they are, if we can say it that way. maybe that's a more canned way of saying it. I think that's a good enough way of saying it. And that is through the breath. So you have a website, The Breath Space. You have a lot of talks on the breath. Did you know that? You have a website called The Breath Space. Your face is on there.
Fortunately, I do still remember that. If I didn't,
that's good.
we'd have another conversation.
Yeah,
We'll check you out.
talk.
We'll check you out when you don't remember that anymore. Yeah. There may come a day. We'll be ready for it. But I want to ask about how you initially bring that in with patients. If you could speak a little bit towards your orientation with the breath. People breath work, breath meditation is becoming more and more popular, more and more common. So people might have an idea of that. But I'd love for you to just speak a little bit to the breath and how it relates to the body and how you use it with patients.
Yes, thank you. I'm not going to go into the history, the evolution of how, I've always been somatically inclined. My mom took me to my first yoga class in the basement of our synagogue in McKeesport, Pennsylvania, when I was 7 years old.
Wow.
I think I've said
cool.
that.
Wow.
I've said that sentence many times, but yes, I was 7 years old in the basement of our synagogue. And this was, giving my age, this was in the very early 70s. And I've always been interested in the body, right? So doing yoga therapy and breath work, and I was introduced to Reiki and breath work right after I graduated naturopathic medical school. And I won't go into that right now, but it's a very vigorous form of breath work with the goal of releasing. It is all about, let's release this blockage. It's very forceful, very aggressive.
But let's push to release it. Like, let's pry it out of your mental hand.
Yes. We're going to get
this
your
vigorous
body
breathing
to respond. So now you can't do.
Yeah.
Which there's a lot of breath work out there, and a lot of biohackers love that, right? Because they have an illusion of control, even when they relinquish control. But
and this, just for context, some people have heard about, I think probably the most common form of breath work in that direction. It's different. It's a different style, but a lot of people have heard of the Wim Hof breathing. So that is in the direction of that type of vigorous breath work. There's obviously differences between Reiki and breath work and Wim Hof type of breathing.
Wim Hof and holotropic breathing and conscious connected. There's a few things that I think they're equally popular.
Can you describe the difference for people?
Reichian, yes, I can. But Reichian breathwork, Wilhelm Reich, who was a disciple of Freud, who broke off from Freud, who believed it was in the body, and he talked about the orgone. Homeopaths talk about the organon. Hahnemann wrote a book called The Organon, which was about the life force.
Which orgone are we talking about? Okay.
I
nailed it.
I can go down that rabbit hole.
The silent moment. You're talking about the life force, and I was just thinking.
You have
think of one orgone.
Yeah.
It's an orgón, as they would say in Spanish.
Anyway, back to you.
Keep going. No,
back to you, Brad. I've thoroughly embarrassed myself already. Please.
No. I could go there. Wilhelm Reich talked about the different locks that we had in our body. And they were similar to the chakras, but he claimed he didn't know about chakra theory. Whether that's true or not, he was well read. I don't know. Yeah. But his chakras were opposite than conventional chakras, starting at the bottom and up. But anyway, he said the main chakra that gets locked is the diaphragm. He didn't call it chakras. But the main area that got locked was first the diaphragm, then the eyes, and then it descended. And it's because what his writings were, that the baby is crying because that was the only way it could communicate. This is even before the baby could lift its head, right? It could just move its eyes and it can cry. And then if a parent held the baby with cold, forceful hands, this is, his German writing, it would learn, or if it was ignored, it learned, don't cry. Don't cry or I'll be hurt. Don't cry because nobody's going to come. Gets into attachment theory if you want to go there. But so the diaphragm locks, and that's the initial one. And he said everyone, global statement, everyone in the world has that. So what he started to do to free the energy is he would have you lie over what looked like it looked like a chair, like a bench with a pad, and you would lie over it, opening up, in a back bend kind of thing, and
Mm.
you
Okay.
would pant.
Mm.
And you would pant for 20 minutes, basically in Reichian approach. Now, any Reichians who hear this, if they're still out there, might argue with me some of the nuances of what neo-Reichians would say, but you would pant until you'd start to cry, until the energy released, right? And I
Mm.
used to do this with some people, and Heather, we did this in the class, I think,
Yeah.
um,
Yeah.
one of these exercises. And in my private practice, I can tell you every single person would start to pant, and I got two responses. They would burst into tears, or they'd said, "We're not going there. Can't do it."
Wow.
They felt everything coming up.
Wow.
Yeah.
And so actually that was my foray into this. I thought, oh, this is really interesting. Let's study this. And then I studied Emily Conrad, who did Continuum, and she had a breath work that was very similar. And then I looked at holotropic breath work and all of these. Wim Hof is a little bit different, but it's these panting for, we could talk about Kapalabhati and Bhastrika breathing in yoga. The yogic breathing was for a spiritual purpose. It's not like we do in these yoga classes. Let's do this energizing. It was really for spiritual
Stretching and
yoga.
calisthenics, you mean?
Yeah.
You mean the stretching and calisthenics classes?
Yes, exactly. So I'm just going to say that with Reiki and breathwork, I'd seen this, but then I was interested in all of those, and I learned biofeedback.
Mm.
I might be changing my timeline somewhere, but I learned biofeedback. And I can even tell you when I went to a Continuum, Emily Conrad workshop training, not with her, we did about 3 hours of breathing that was similar. There was movement involved, but we went for 2 to 3 hours. And when I came out of this, I had like a whole rebirthing experience. I couldn't walk.
Wow.
See, I say that now, and I was like, that's just what happened. I'm not attached to it. I don't think that it meant everything. But I did have all kinds of things, because I can tell you what happened in my brain. I couldn't tell you what happened in my brain then. I was deoxygenating it. Wim Hof used to claim you are super oxygenating it, which was not true, not basic science. So I did all these things, and then I started learning biofeedback, and I learned about, wow, when you do this breath work, look what's happening to your muscles, look what's happening to your heart rate, look what's happening to your skin conductance. And I started to learn more about physiology of respiration. And so I started teaching different things. Now, that's my overture. How do I use the breath? Why I like to talk about breath is because you could talk about breath on multiple levels. You could talk about it from a spiritual perspective. You could talk about it from an emotional perspective, which I can define what that is. But it's a metabolic, it's a biochemical perspective, it's a somatic perspective. And the breath reflects how you're orienting in this moment, right? We talk about breathing, and we can't just so many people listening to this might know about HRV, and they might know about breath pacing. And that's a belief that if I just pace my breath, that I'm going to stimulate the vagus nerve and everything will be better. And that shows complete ignorance about the whole complex system, because you could be overbreathing, which is changing your metabolic activity there. You can get into hyperventilation even by breathing slowly. But you also have to talk about your posture. How's the diaphragm?
Sure.
Most of our posture, I saw you sit up.
What posture?
What
posture? What posture could you be talking about?
No, even mine. Most of our posture is decompensated because of these things and social, on the computer, and how we just sit and how we collapse at the end of the day. So we could talk about breath work. People come to see me, we talk about breath work for weeks just by talking about how do you align your posture. And we have to do therapeutic exercises to release the tension and to help them cultivate about awareness of how they're using their body the rest of the day. I posit that a lot of people have what they call anxiety simply because of posture. That's ergonomics. So we could talk about breath work. And almost everybody who comes in and says they have panic attack, I think every single person who's ever come in to see me privately or Bastyr Clinic, we'd say, well, what if you don't have a psychological issue? What if you just don't know how to breathe? And then you've given it meaning. I mean, I've said this so many times to people. It's like, if you see someone with a panic attack, we all know what that looks like if they're hyperventilating.
Right.
The common, not the safest thing to do, but the common treatment is breathe into a paper bag.
Mm-hmm.
They're breathing the same rate. They're still going, but they're recycling CO2 and carbon dioxide. And then the carbon dioxide binds with the hemoglobin, allows oxygen to displace, allows oxygen to get the tissues, the blood vessels open, the lungs open, the bronchial tubes open, and what they call panic lessens. They feel like they're not getting enough oxygen in, but that's not true. It's physiologically not true. They're getting too much oxygen in. The tissues aren't getting it. So it's like there's a lot, and this is what really expanded my mind. So it's like to work with our state, how we want to be in any given moment. We have to talk about this body, how we're engaging with the body, how we're using, because, and I will say use, because how many of us use our body is there to do to carry this thing around, and I don't respect it, right? It's like, it's a tool. It's like, no, be in our body. It holds all this. And so if one of my favorite studies was with medical students, where they asked medical students a question and they noticed what happened. First year medical students, you'd say, what is hyperventilation? And they would go, and then they hold their breath for 4 years. And then during the residency, then practice. And so they've created that condition. So the body responded, it got conditioned. So they don't know how. So you have to break it down slowly. So that's some of my work is really somatic. Sometimes we do talk about pacing, but sometimes we talk about how are you breathing in? Like, we'll use the cognitive / psychological thing. Is like, is it safe for you to breathe in? Is it safe for you to breathe out? The way I also say that is it safe to put your breath out into the world to be seen? Ooh, no.
Wow.
Is it safe to take from the world? Ooh, no. And so that conversation just starts talking about how our posture and our body's responding, and we explore that. So we can explore.
So the breath is almost like this guide into these different places in our mind, places in our body, places in our deeper experience, which, maybe go beyond this emotional level that you're speaking to. The breath seems like it's like this entryway that we can explore everything through.
Exactly.
Beautiful.
Yeah.
Thank you so, so much for coming on today. Thanks for chatting with us.
Yes.
Thank you for sharing so much of this, and not just sharing from the head, but from the heart. It's really, it's sweet to talk to you. We're on air talking, but it's still sweet. It still feels connected.
And I love talking to both of you. It's just great to share the space with you. It really is. And I love just talking about all of these things. I appreciate you both.
Thank you. I know there's so much left for us to talk about. We're just getting warmed up.
So now we've got a little bit of an opportunity to break down this amazing conversation we just had with Brad. I think there were a couple of things that bear going into a little bit further. The first one that I wanted to start on, Heather, he said something really sweet about you, which I think is really true. And I think bears deepening into a little bit, both from the perspective of you as a provider, but also as both of us as patients. All of us human beings, hopefully, are patients at some point or another. We get medical care. One of the things that Brad said about you was that amongst all of his different students, all the different clinicians that he trained, you really stood out in that you developed your own approach and spirit to treating people, which is not to say that you developed your own ideas about medicine, right? That's not what he was saying when he said that. He really meant something different. He meant that your way of interacting people and solving problems with them looks different and is specific to you. And I just wanted to hear a little bit more about, how do you come to work with a patient when you first meet them and learn about what their needs are? What is your approach to this?
Yeah, that was so sweet of Dr. Brad, first of all. I think I think what he's speaking to is potentially, I really try to tailor my plan to the individual patient. And logistically, and from a business sense, this is a horrible idea, right? From a business sense, if everyone that comes in to see you for sleep medicine, you do these first 5 steps, you have a template printed out, it's like everything's
Clockwork.
The same. You don't have to rewrite it. You don't have to think about it. The plug and play is amazing from a business standpoint, and in some ways, in some patient settings, that does really work. And so I think that one thing that I really try to do with patients, if I'm if I'm seeing somebody for let's say sleep, for example, almost every single person is going to get a different plan based on what's going on for them. So I really do think I also try to meet patients where they are, mentally, emotionally, in their behaviors. It's really, to me, a collaborative thing. For me to tell a patient, go home and do these 10 things, and they're not going to do, it's not helpful to me.
They're not even going to get to like 2 of them.
Yeah, it's like, that's not good medicine. That's
Nobody
not helpful
wins.
to them. Yeah, so I think really, really trying to, also meet the patient where there's resistance in whatever thing we're working on, to try to really like move forward. I also tend to be. I have a patient that jokes with me about this. I tend to be kind of gentle in a way. Stern but fair.
Stern but fair.
As Grit would say.
Stern I get. And fair I also get.
But, every once in a while she's like, you need to be a mean cop. You need, like, and that's
I've seen it. Your patient doesn't know what they're asking for.
You can put her in touch with you.
Yeah.
But in a lot of ways, that is just not how I function. Yeah. And there are some systems and practitioners that have that kind of, like, if you don't do X, then like go away, or like have your homework done, or we cancel the appointment, which I think is very extreme.
Yeah.
And for some people there's a way in which that works.
Sure.
But I think that there's so much humanness in this, and there isn't really a right way. We can pretend that there is, even on some of the more basic things where I said, like having a punch card and having these very specific treatment plans. You still have to take in the mental, emotional component and behavior into that being effective for people.
It really seems like, and this is what I felt from what Brad was saying and what you're speaking to, is like bringing the human element into treatment, right? Like, how is this person going to receive this? And, here's what I want for them. What is actually going to help them in the direction of that outcome? Like being flexible about the strategy, clear on the goal, but maybe flexible on the strategy, understanding that, the strategy that's going to work for one patient is going to be different than from another.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think another thing that is incredibly important to me is just the human connection piece.
Yeah.
I want to know my patients. I want them to feel safe. I want them to feel empowered and like they're playing a role. They're asking questions. And I think that piece of feeling truly cared for is really actually important in the whole process.
Also, this human-centric medicine, this is critical to, the behavior change or working with behavior as a patient or with a patient.
Yeah.
I'm curious how you go about behavior change, and I'm sure that this is a core element, but as a physician, this is something that we got into a little bit with Brad as well. How do you go about behavior change? Like these ingrained patterns that people often have, these shame loops, or, a lot of needs that they're trying to meet through certain behaviors, but it's kind of, there's a lot of things that aren't working about it.
Mm-hmm. That's a good question. It's so multifaceted. There's some good research, and like James Clear, Atomic Habits. There's some really good, pragmatic pieces, and we did touch on that in some episode about habit stacking, and so there's pragmatic things, which I think are so incredibly useful. One of the ones I think I harp on the most with my patients is the low bar.
Love that. Yes. This has been critical for me over time.
I like a low bar.
Yeah.
You know what I mean? Just fall right over it.
Other than what I think you mean, please say more. Educate our fair listeners.
Yeah. So the concept is really that you want to set the goal to be the most attainable. So if your goal is that you exercise, you're someone who goes to the gym, you're someone who works out. The initial goals might be that you identify you're going to do it after work, and the initial goal is that you come home and put your sneakers on.
Right. People have heard that so many times, and people say that about running too, like just put the running shoes on.
Yeah.
And I think people roll their eyes at that a little bit
because it feels ridiculous. But do they do it?
Right. If you do it, you know that it actually has a big impact.
Yes. Yeah. And the shoes on, for some people that is too low.
Sure.
Right.
Sure. You have to set your low bar according to what you're doing. Yeah.
Right. And so for some people that really is like, for some people the goal might actually be like, you want to walk after dinner, then start by doing a 2-minute walk after dinner.
Yeah.
If you feel compelled to walk for 10, 15 minutes, great. But you get credit for walking 2 minutes.
Right.
And you're creating consistency in that. So, I think that that's one where, it's like, I was saying this to a patient just yesterday. It's like, if it's not embarrassing, we're doing it wrong.
That's funny. That's funny. That's it has to be embarrassingly low.
Yes.
Okay.
Yes.
Cool. I think another one that comes up for me as a kind of meditation guide, instructor, facilitator, is understanding, like, if there is a behavior loop that is, in some way deleterious, it's impacting somebody in a way that they're not liking, understanding, like, what's behind it. It's meeting some kind of need at some level. It might be something, like, super primitive, right? Like, it might be hard to point. It's like, no, that's not doing anything good in my life. It's like, sure, but, like, go to, like, the body level. Like, what are you feeling leading up to it? Oh, like, this is your way of, maybe it's like releasing anger or anxiety or whatever it is. That's a need that has to be met. It has to be met a different way. And, if you're trying to change it, but it still has to be met. That feels like a critical step in the process.
Yeah. Everything we're doing serves us in some way.
Right.
Without a doubt about that.
Right.
Yeah.
And if we don't recognize that, we end up cycling in this kind of shame or self-hatred about it because we're not understanding, like, oh, obviously I'm, like, we have to come to the realization that there is a very clear way that we're trying to care for ourselves. Mm-hmm. And it's just a little bit silly. We're doing it in a silly way. But when we're feeling that kind of, like, shame or self-hatred around habit patterns, it's because we're not seeing the obvious way that the habit is serving us.
Yeah, I think a great example of that is someone who is trying to modify their diet, right? And I just had a bunch of pie, and I just kept eating the pie, right? Thanksgiving's a great example of this, indulgence pattern, where the goal for them is to be more restricted, and that kicks off a shame spiral. And so instead of being with this beautiful, delicious piece of pie and enjoying every bite of this and like, ooh la la, like I'm celebrating myself, I'm enjoying this, it's wonderful. Instead, it's like each bite is like,
You're torturing yourself
yes.
internally for it.
Yes,
And it's like, no, meet the need, for God's sake.
Yes.
It's a great piece of pie. You know?
Yes, and maybe we turn that story from, oh, I'm doing something bad that I don't want to do, to like, whoa, I'm really taking care of myself in this moment. I'm really loving on myself in this. And we want to specify, when you really get into it, you want to actually articulate what it is that behavior is serving.
Sure.
But, it's like, I'm really emotionally comforting myself
right
in this moment. Right. Family is hard, so this little piece of pie is going to get me through Thanksgiving.
Right.
Not my family, of course.
No, your family's great.
Perfect.
Your family is great.
They are.
That actually toes, that I think that points to this piece of self-soothing versus self-care. And I think that there's a really interesting continuum, and it can be a pretty gray zone in there, and there's ways that the same activity can be a little bit of self-soothing, self-care. There's nothing wrong with either one of those. There might be times, though, that we notice like, ooh, I'm really leaning into self-soothing right now, and like not actually doing the self-care pieces. And that might be good for like a short term, like I should be soothing myself. Maybe the holidays are a hard time, and this is a time where I'm going to have that pie, or I'm going to zone out on my phone, or whatever this habit is that you're not liking. Like maybe this is something, short of it being a really harmful addictive pattern. Maybe this is something that you actually know you're going to lean into, and that's okay. But knowing that in the bigger picture, you really want to steer the ship a little more towards self-care. We're all going to need some amount of self-soothing too. Life is hard. I remember one big learning for me in this self-soothing versus self-care piece, when I lived for a few years at the Zen Temple here in South Seattle. And I don't know if I've told you this story before, but there were all sorts of things when I started living there that like were kind of like little light bulbs for me. Just seeing the way that people were in real life. I had this idealized image of how a Zen temple would be, and how people would behave there.
Exactly.
What is the community like? And it's like, it's just people, actually. But one of the biggest learnings is, my teacher, who is I still hold in extremely high esteem and consider a teacher of mine, Genjo Roshi. He, I came to learn because I, was his neighbor, that like most nights he watches TV for a while, maybe, I don't know, half hour, an hour, however long it was. I wasn't timing it, but I was like, like at that time I was like on my high horse. That's not what we're supposed to do. Yeah, I was on my high horse, not watching TV or anything at that time, and I was like, I'm just going to do more Zazen meditation.
You watch TV now?
From time to time, I watch TV.
Whoa.
Don't tell anybody. Don't tell the listeners, please. I'm healthy. I'm a health influencer. I'm really good. But on a serious note, like I was like, oh, he's self-soothing. He's got over 4 decades of like deep meditation practice. I mean, I hope that one day I will have that much practice under my belt. And sounds like there's a decent chance I'll still need some form of self-soothing, So I think it's important to be realistic with ourselves of like, hey, it's okay that I'm doing these things that are sweet for myself and maybe don't align with the highest ideal image of how I want things to be. Being realistic in that way, I think, is important, while also steering the ship towards self-care because it naturally will steer away from there.
Yeah.
What other pieces do you really frequently try to bring in to working on behavior change with patients?
Another piece that I think is helpful is really accountability. And so that is something I try to set up either between the patient and myself or within their community. We know this with meta-analysis of diets that often it's the ability to be consistent over a long period of time and to be accountable to that thing. That's why Weight Watchers, I think, is one of a very successful system.
Sure.
Or
AA, for example, right? You're
Great
accountable to your group, and you get coins as you progress. And there's ways of marking that you've been accountable. You might get sponsees.
Yeah.
You have your sponsor. Yeah.
Yeah. Yeah. So I do think that is, in my opinion, critical. Yeah. And then I just think the psycho-emotional component of habit change and behavior is just so, it's like that's where it all is.
Sure.
In my opinion.
Sure.
And I might be biased, but I see that clinically. And so I think that's where most of the work really is.
Yeah. One big piece for me that unlocks some of that emotional element is, again, going back to something that Brad mentioned, which he used this term and we didn't really get into it too much. He kind of, he likes to throw these little jabs, and I feel like maybe these are seeds for future conversations. But one of the things that he said, he made this reference to biohackers and their illusion of control. And I wanted to dive into that illusion of control a little bit. And what is Brad saying about that? And it's not just biohackers.
Yeah.
Everybody has the illusion of control. And it's not, I want to be very careful about how we talk about this, because I think people can get this kind of nihilistic feeling and like a lot of fear and think that I mean something that I don't mean about, that there's some kind of fate or destiny and you have no control. That's not really what I'm saying.
Well, I think you've come to the right place as a control expert.
Oh, God, I hope we can both make it out of here. Only one of us is going to make it out. But what I really think that Brad was getting at here, and what that means to me when I think about the illusion of control, especially from this Buddhist lens, which I think is really his lens as well, is we are all sets of conditions and circumstances. And some of those conditions and circumstances are currently active in us. Some of them are things that happened historically that, somehow live on in our body, in our genetics, or in our brains, the way that we're wired. And some of them are completely outside of us, right? They're things that we bump into in the world. And so if we can understand these kind of behavior loops as sets of circumstances or like systems that we're a part of, and just take the I'm so bad out of it for a second, or I need this or I need that out of it for just a second, just to view the situation and say, okay, this is a system in which, this person, me, is feeling these things or has these needs, does this thing, and this happens, and it leads to this outcome that is undesired. And then this happens, which leads me, or I feel this way, which leads me to, again, go back through this cycle again. Seeing that cycle from a kind of stepped back perspective, you can start to understand this doesn't really have anything to do with whether I'm good or bad. For whatever reason, some mix of the way that I'm wired, the way that my external conditions are, the situation that I'm in, leads to this result. How can I now change the way that system is functioning to change the result? So like that's one. Now, still you might hear that and say, well, if you're saying you're changing, then that's, again, part of the illusion of control. We can talk about that. I think there is a long loop of cycles of conversation we can have about how deep of a spiral in that illusion of control goes. But even just utilizing it at that kind of base level of stepping back from a situation is extremely useful.
Mm-hmm. And then how would you modify that?
Right. Well, I mean, I think it depends on the context of the situation, but essentially, you might change what's a trigger leading into it. Mm-hmm. And so often, one of the triggers is the ways that we talk to ourselves or feel about ourselves after we engage in a habit that we're not excited about.
Yeah.
Or maybe it's a place that we're going to, that's a trigger. Or maybe there's some other activity that we're doing that could be a trigger. So that is an easy, you will find like links in this chain that are, each of them trigger each other, but you kind of figure out like, what is the weakest link here? What can I take out? Yeah. The only one that it's not advisable to take out is yourself. That if we want to keep that one going, that's important. Yeah. We care about you. We want you to be around. But other links in the chain, you figure out like, okay, what can be navigated here? What can be maneuvered?
Yeah. And in each of those links, I think the underlying piece is the emotional interchange, I guess, is what I would say.
Right. And some are more workable and some are not. Some are like, that's just not going to change. My reaction to X is just, that's going to take years of therapy, or depending on who you ask.
And we don't know how long he has,
or depending on who you ask, just a single psychedelic session.
One more time.
Another really poignant piece that Brad talked about was this, he made this comment about manifestation meditations, which, we have some feelings about. I don't think that we need to paint everything as good or everything as bad. I think context is really important. He gave a very specific context of terminally ill or chronically ill patients who, there's certain providers that might come in and, do a manifestation meditation that things were no longer going to be that way. And the perspective that he shared was much better in his eyes, and this resonates with me as well, to say, however things are going to be, maybe they change, maybe they stay the same. How do you want to be with it? And to really have that be our work and that be the focus of not just our meditation, but our whole life practice.
Yeah.
That just feels so important for me. And I, though he was talking about it in the most extreme context, where I think a lot of us can see, like, that is really valid in that situation. Like, let's work on what's here right now rather than some other way that we want things to be. I think that is always true. I think that we as human beings need a lot more work on, how can I be with the way that things are now, rather than putting my eggs in the basket of things being different in some future way. It's not to say that we don't work towards things becoming different, right? We take steps in that direction, but it's also important, how are we taking steps in that direction, and how are we living right now in this moment? There is so much unworking to do there for us, our craving, our expectation, which actually keeps us in these loops of incredible suffering and pain in the meantime.
Yeah. What's that Viktor Frankl quote? Is that everything can be taken from a man but one thing, the last of his human freedoms, and that's to choose one's attitude in any given circumstance, to choose his way.
Yes.
And that's resonating to me because that is true. It's like, as humans, we do want to control things that are happening to us and around us, and really all we have is how we engage with it, how we engage with ourselves, how we react and respond.
And this is that feels like the core psychological resiliency, like, quality. Like, this is the core quality that we can develop for psychological resiliency in any condition, which is, how am I going to be with how things are right now?
Yeah. Yep.
That's it.
Yeah. Can I show up with ease and love and kindness?
Even when, in Viktor Frankl's situation, I'm in a concentration camp. And maybe,
for those that don't know.
Right.
Yeah.
I mean, and maybe, those are long shots. Maybe it's not ease and love, although, there's a really incredible story in the Book of Joy. The Dalai Lama talks about one of his brother monks who was imprisoned by the Chinese for a number of years and tortured. And, he eventually gets out of this situation. I'm not sure exactly how that happened, but they meet again, and he's like, oh my God, like, are you okay? Like, how are you? And he's like tearing up, and he's like, I was in so much danger. And he's like, I know, you were in so much danger. He's like, no, like, I was in so much danger. Like, there were so many times where I almost lost my compassion for the people that were torturing me. Like, wow.
Yeah.
Like, that gives me shivers to hear.
Yeah.
That is a real possibility. Now, that's a stretch for most of us, but that is a real possibility for the human mind. And, who knows, the way that those living conditions in the concentration camp were for Viktor Frankl, right? But, like, we can stretch ourselves to actually be at ease even in very difficult situations. Maybe at ease is a stretch. Maybe it's just that we find some amount of clarity Maybe it's that we're just not reacting. Maybe it's that we're just aware. We're aware of our fear or difficulty. We do have that choice that he's talking about.
Yeah.
I think that's a good reminder for all of us in our everyday life. And it's a good takeaway, in my opinion, from our conversation with Brad, that we have this choice, even when we don't feel like we have it all the time. It's a good reminder for me going forward and my next few days ahead.
Yeah. I'll take that reminder as well.
Well, I think that's it from us today. We hope you had a good time listening and look forward to more conversations, both with us too, but also with Brad.
Yes.
All right. You stay classy, Numinati. See you soon.
We'll see you some other time.